today's devotion is all about imprecatory psalms. So that's what I named it today, Imprecatory Psalms. We're on day 315 and we're on November the 11th. And today's morning rinse includes Psalms 136 to 138. And the featured verses include Psalm 137, 8 through 9. O daughter of Babylon, you devastated one, how blessed will be the one who repays you with the recompense with which you have repaid us. How blessed will be the one who seizes and dashes your little ones against the rock. Well, part of studying the Bible is trying to understand passages such as today's featured verses. In fact, back in 1997, I wrote down, and I had the date actually on my 3-ring binder, but I wrote in my 3-ring binder the question, what does this verse mean? And I wrote it down there, and it's things like that have baffled me. What would be the purpose of this verse? But it wasn't until decades later that I made a concerted effort to actually answer that question. First time I read it and wrote that down, I didn't try and dive deeper into the meaning of it. I just wrote down, what does this verse mean, as I was kind of studying it. No, God does not advocate dashing kids against rocks. To understand these verses, we must understand the context of all of Psalms 137. That whole psalm, we've got to understand what it actually is meaning and the context of it. And so I began reading what commentators and theologians wrote about these verses and learned that many describe Psalm 137 as what we call imprecatory psalm. I didn't even know what that was. I hadn't learned about that growing up. I didn't understand it. But now that I've heard the name and that term, it actually perks my ears when I actually hear pastors using that word. But imprecatory means to invoke evil or curses on an enemy. So a few other examples of imprecatory psalms are Psalms 69, Psalm 94, 109, and 143, just to name a few that I discovered and read about while I was doing this research. So we've read 3 of those Psalms, and we've got the one today, 137, and then 143 is coming up in a few days. So without understanding the context, the words in these Psalms can raise ethical questions on exactly why they are even in the Bible and why someone would even say those things. And the inclusion of imprecatory psalms has some common theories, including the idea that when these specific psalms were spoken, they were allegoric and belonged to a very specific time period. So Psalm 137 was written during the time of the Jewish exile in Babylon, and they were taken slaves after the city of Jerusalem was burned down. And the Jews were then told to sing one of the songs of Zion. And you can see that in Psalm 137:1. So they were told to sing one of the songs of Zion. And this command was almost a form of mockery from what I read. One commentator described this scenario as like the time of slavery when a slave owner beat a slave and then asked him to sing. The slave would begin singing in his own language for only the other slaves to understand. And the words of that song could have gone like this: You have caused us much pain. May your crops vanish like the dew. You have beaten our children. May the same thing happen to you. The slave owner never knew the wish of revenge that the slaves were singing, but these songs are like the imprecatory psalms sung by the Israelites. they had sung for all the nations of their enemies to be destroyed. God sees our hearts. He sees our hurts, and He is never blind to our tears, nor silent to our pain. He hears our honest cries of revenge and heals the pain in our hearts if we let Him. These imprecatory psalms are, something that we're not used to reading about. And if we don't understand the context of what is actually happening in that time period, then we could easily go, what in the world is this going on? Why is this in my Bible? And what does this verse mean? Which is what I did way, way, way back in 1997. So today's challenge to dig deeper is I want you to run a search on an imprecatory psalm and read about the context of these types of passages. You can use one of the ones that I had listed and, or find another one. But out of the ones I had listed, there was Psalms 69, 94, 109, of course, the one that we read today, which is 137, and then 143, just to name a few, and there are more. And the interesting thing about it is many atheists use imprecatory psalms to discredit the Bible. And as we study, understanding context is vital to our walk and having the confidence to stand up for the word. So if you have not done a study on an imprecatory psalm, that is your mission for today. Your challenge for today is to take one of these imprecatory psalms or find your own and read about it and read the psalm, and then see if you can dive into the context of that psalm and what a lot of commentators and theologians have said about that psalm. And that's how I learned about them, is just studying and reading what other people were posting about their studies and what other pastors have said. But that's how I learned, and that is your challenge for today. And so what I want you to do when you pull out your journal tonight in your evening reflection is to write down what you learned about the context of the imprecatory psalm that you chose to read about or that you chose to learn a little bit about. Because when we know more about the word, especially on situations like this or psalms like this, the imprecatory psalms that are written, it helps us to be more grounded in the knowledge that we have regarding the Bible, and when an atheist would actually say something, or when someone is just in disagreement with or has a question about something of this nature that is written in the Psalms. So I hope that gives you some insight into the things that I've learned about this. And also, it could have been easy for me to skip over that verse and not bring it to light, but it would not do us any good if I had ignored the imprecatory psalm, because it is a part of studying the word. And so I hope that you got some insight today and took a little deeper dive into the psalm, as well as what exactly is an imprecatory psalm and what the commentators out there are saying about it. And I hope you learned something today. And I hope that it not only did just, give you a little more depth into your knowledge, but gave you something to share with others about as well. And if you don't have my devotional, you can get the link, which is in the show notes, or if you're following this on YouTube, you can get it into the comment section of the video. And until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. God bless you.